Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. I research, write, speak, and interview podcast guests on the topics of summer camp, parenting, and happiness. In episode 11, I'm interviewing New York Times financial columnist and author Ron Lieber about his book, The Opposite of Spoiled. To start our interview, I asked Ron to explain what motivated him to write The Opposite of Spoiled.
Sure. So I had a personal and somewhat practical reason, but also a more macro reason, too. The personal practical reason came from the fact that I had a 3-year-old who was asking a lot of super intense questions about money. I still remember the first one was, Daddy, why don't we have a summer house? And, that just sort of blew me away. We were not talking about summer houses. We were not in a position to have a second home, and we still are not. And yet she had sort of picked that up, and she wanted answers. And I wasn't really sure what the right answer was. But it was clear to me that, she was asking bigger questions, too, more searching ones, right? Why do some people have things that we don't have, and how do I feel about that? And are the grown-ups in my life making choices about these things? And if so, why are they making the choices that they were making? So I wanted to be able to provide her with answers that would be satisfactory, not only when she was 3, but as she grew older and more sophisticated. So that was the practical part of it. But, as I thought about this more, I realized that, every money conversation is also a conversation around values. And as I began to hear from more and more parents who were struggling with their own questions about money, I realized that there was an opportunity to kind of reframe this question of how to talk to kids about money, to make it not just a financial literacy conversation, but also a conversation about all the things that we hold dear and the values and the virtues and the character traits that we want to imprint upon our kids, because those conversations around money can lead directly to rituals around spending and saving and giving that help us make it clear to our child or children what it is that we stand for as families.
Yeah. And that's what there's a couple things that really stuck out to me. One is I definitely grew up in the generation where it was like our parents didn't talk about how much money we had. And it was a very private, kind of almost secretive thing like you describe in your book. And then there's this one part where you say the fear that talking about money too much will produce money grubbing kids. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. I think that's what a lot of people who have enough money and can afford things are kind of nervous about. They don't want to share with their kids, how much money they have. So I thought that was a really important point that you made in the book.
Thanks. There's this sense of denial that I think some people have where they feel like if they don't talk about it, it will cease to be important. But of course, money is an important social and economic force. I mean, it's what drives economic decision-making, right? I mean, it seems almost obvious to say it, but money is intensely powerful and yet is also incredibly mysterious, precisely because some grown-ups won't talk about it, right? So it's only natural that our kids are going to be curious, and if we fail to answer their questions, not only will they be frustrated and not trust us, but they'll go to other sources to try and get answers to their questions. They'll go to the internet, they'll Google their family name, they'll Google their address. They'll start picking up things that they hear from other kids on the playground. And, if we really believe that these money conversations are also about values, then I think we want to own those conversations ourselves as parents in the household.
Oh, definitely. Well, I wish I had had your book sooner because my kids are all older. My youngest is 13 now, but I'm definitely already have used some of the things that you've taught, and we're pretty much kind of revamping the way we do money for school for next year, like for lunch money and that kind of thing, like basically going over with them, like this is your budget and you get to decide, if you're going to make your lunch more often, then maybe you'll have more for a bigger lunch one day, and just kind of helping them think through these things a little bit more, because right now, a lot of kids that I found in my family, it's just like, well, if mom and dad will buy it, then I want it. But if I have to spend my own money, I'm going to make a different decision. And
right.
so I think that comes down to the value too, is like valuing the family's money collectively, of how we're going to spend it and how we're going to make decisions. So I just, again, I mean, I know you just wrote it, so my kids were, but I'm going to use it with my kids for sure, even now. And it really is great, just the whole thing about being more open about, well, how much does that internet cost? How much are we paying for the phone service? And, why do we want to turn off the lights? I think all that stuff is so important, because they are going to be in apartments and having to pay these things on their own pretty soon.
Indeed, right? And it's, helpful with the small stuff, and it's helpful with the big stuff too, even those may be harder conversations. When I was reporting the opposite of spoiled, I can't tell you the number of times I ran into families where the third or the fourth or the fifth graders didn't realize that they were going to private school. They didn't realize that their school cost money. Sometimes they would find a very large bill sitting around in the house. And, once they can learn to read, all bets are off. They're going to find out all sorts of stuff.
Right.
So, you better have been honest along the way. And if you've hidden things or avoided talking about them, you better be ready to have those conversations.
Oh my gosh, definitely. Yeah. And I like how you emphasize that it is a really great tool to teach values and character traits. Like specifically, you talk about delayed gratification, and how if there's something that you want, that you need to decide, are you willing to save for that and work for it for a few years? And I think that's something that sometimes is missing in families that are more affluent. Sometimes they just don't really catch on to that. Their kids think, well, you can afford to get me this great car right when I'm old enough to drive. And they kind of miss out on that opportunity to teach that value.
Yeah, as I dove into the academic literature, such as it is on the topic of kids and money and values and parenting, there was one term that jumped out at me from the sociologists. They kind of refer to this as forced deprivation or artificial deprivation, right? If you're lucky enough to have even $1 more than you need, and are able to afford at least some of the things that you want, if you are a reasonable enough parent to know that it's probably not good to allow your child everything that he or she wants, you will be making choices along the way to, limit what is possible and what is available. And the whole question of, how and when we limit which things and which experiences and what quantity is not an easy thing to get right. So, it starts with being mindful of the fact that that is in fact what you are doing, and then making some careful decisions about how you're going to do it, hopefully in consultation with your co-parent if you have one, and with both of you on the same page.
Yes. And also, I think talking with the kids, because even your 3-year-old could talk about some of these things. I think, even that conversation about, well, whether or not you have a second home or something is even also a conversation. Maybe, instead you prefer to do other kinds of vacations, or it's just not something that you want to spend what you've saved on, or you want to donate more, or, whatever it may be. Those again are, especially kids like to talk about those things. And I think sharing it with them helps teach them along the way how you're trying to get it right and not always getting it right. Because of course, adults aren't great with money a lot of the time. So I think sharing with kids, even mistakes that we've made or times that we wish we had saved more or done something different, I think is really good.
Yeah, and these are trade-offs, and grown-ups make them every day, often subconsciously without realizing that is in fact what we were doing. And so, learning to calibrate those and also, think carefully and pointedly about whether something is a want or whether something is a need, and trading off one want with another kind of want is a big part of what it means to be a financial grown-up, or at least to try to become one.
Definitely. Oh my goodness. Yes. So as I mentioned, when I first reached out to you, I'm a summer camp director. So of course, as I'm reading your book, I had no idea that the summer camp was even going to be mentioned in it, but I get to the section in your book, and let me see what it's called. How Overnight Camp Can Help, or something along those lines. And I was just curious, you must have some kind of camp experience. Tell us about your camp experience.
So I was a camper at the now defunct Camp Golden Eagle in Woodruff, Wisconsin. And it was a classic old school Midwestern camp, a bunch of rundown cabins with the lake on one side, Lake Minocqua, and, the fields on the other side with the, mess hall in the middle. And, so it was a classic Midwestern sleepaway camp. And it was, it was a powerful experience for me. I was not, one of these lifers that goes for 8 or 9 or 10 years and then becomes a counselor, for a couple of reasons. I got really interested in basketball and started going to specialized, kind of week-long sleep camps for that. But eventually I had to go to work and make money for college. And so, I was not a kind of lifelong or childhood long camper the way that some people are. But it was definitely something that made a difference in my life and was absolutely a net positive.
That's great. So when you talked about, what do you think are some of the specific elements, and you talked about this in your book, of camp programs that you think kind of help kids learn some of these important, what you call like non-spoiled character traits?
Well, I had this hypothesis, or at least it was sort of a realization early on in the reporting of The Opposite of Spoiled, that there was an incredible opportunity that sleepaway camp affords, right? Because for better or for worse, we make choices about the communities in which our children reside, right? We make choice about their school communities. We make the choice about the neighborhoods that we live in. We make choices about, where we go on vacation if we're lucky enough to afford that. But what sleepaway camp offers is an opportunity to quite deliberately place them in a very different environment. And if you are careful about that, you can use that summer period as almost a sort of, spiritual delousing, right? If you're worried that whatever upper middle class or upper class environment you have chosen and provided for your children for all of the best reasons, right? Because it's safe, because it's beautiful, because the schools are excellent. That's all well and good. But there is some value in stripping away at least some and maybe many of the comforts that surround them 10 months out of the year and give them an opportunity to live very differently. And so I went searching during the reporting for a camp or camps that do the best job of that.
Amazing. Yeah. You call it symbolic deprivation. And I thought that is such a great description, because it's like you really kind of get back to simplicity, at least at most kind of traditional, the old school kind of camps like you described from your youth, where it's very rustic and, maybe no electricity and all that. And I think it is true that kids kind of get to reset a bit because they're, away from their technology. They're not looking at pictures on social media of more things that they want to buy. And they're just, the focus and what's valued at camp is very different, I think, than kind of what they're experiencing maybe in the outside world.
Absolutely. And see, when I went on this quest, I, asked around and I talked to all the, the camp ladies, the consultants, and I kept hearing the same couple of camps over and over again. And, I went to visit them all. And the one where I had the most kind of formative experience as a reporter was a place called Pine Island Camp, which is on a little, 2.5 acre island in the middle of a lake in the middle of the state of Maine. And as I was out there, after the boys gave me the tour and, I learned about how little electricity they had and how they, bathed naked in the lake with biodegradable soap and all the rest of it. I'm sitting in this, little cabin with the director, and I asked him, kind of what all this was about. And he said, we've got these kids, right? A couple of them at least each summer that come from New Canaan, Connecticut, right? Sort of classic upper middle class, upper class suburb. And he said, the problem with New Canaan is that nobody needs you in New Canaan, which I thought was profound, right? Because he contrasted it with the island. He said, here on the island, he said, we've only got 80 or 90 of us, and there's no computers, and there's no water ski boat, and there's no spring-loaded aerobics floor. He said, the only thing that we have is one another. And for camp to be an amazing experience for every single person is needed to make that special, right? And that's not something that you get. That's not an experience that you can buy at any price during the school year, right? So that's the kind of place you want to send your kid.
Yeah. So that's so great. And I think that's one of my things I've always kind of hypothesized, that a lot of the teen angst and kids getting so depressed is because of that very reason, that they just don't feel needed or necessary. They don't really have purpose. And when you give them purpose and things to do, whether that's even, serving as a junior counselor at a camp, or helping out younger kids, or more chores at home and helping out more at home and that kind of thing, it really does make people feel better, to feel like they're part of something bigger and they have a purpose.
I think that's absolutely true. And there's a famous psychologist from Stanford University who is particularly strong on the psychology of adolescence. And he wrote a book on it, and I'm now going to forget his name. But you made that exact point, right? The biggest challenge for parents, for educators, for anybody who deals with kids and teens in particular, is helping them find a purpose, to find something they feel strongly about, that they can make a commitment to. And it's one of the real keys to kind of keeping them on the straight and narrow and helping them be as happy as they possibly can be.
Definitely. Okay. Well, Ron, I really appreciate your time today. Again, I really want to recommend your book. I'm going to write about it and post some notes on my website. The book is called The Opposite of Spoiled. Where else can parents find your work? Where can they read or, visit and find out new things that you're writing about?
So I operate a thriving, rambunctious Facebook community at facebook.com/Ron Lieber author, where we're constantly kicking around ideas and tactics around kids and money and values and some of the big expenditures that come with being a parent. So I would urge people to come there. You can sign up for my newsletter at ronlieber.com. I promise not to pester people too often. I'm on Twitter at Ron Lieber, and then my column in the New York Times appears once a week, and you can find that at nytimes.com/Lieber.
And is your column specifically about, is it just, it's general financial, or is it specifically about parenting and financial issues?
My column in the Times is about anything and everything that hits you in the wallet. So I do write about family issues from time to time, but it's not my sole focus.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like we can keep up with all of your wonderful things. I really appreciated in the book how many different people you talked to and how you got just information from so many different areas to share. So it is awesome, and I'm going to continue highly recommending it. I want to thank you so much for chatting with me today and taking some time for that. And I look forward to staying connected and hearing what else great work that you're doing.
Likewise, I appreciate it.
Okay, have a great day. Thank you. It was an honor to talk with Ron for this episode of the podcast. For show notes and a link to Ron's website, Facebook page, and New York Times column, visit sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 11. Today I'll leave you with a quote from The Opposite of Spoiled. The Opposite of Spoiled is a generational manifesto first and foremost. A promise to our kids that we will make them better at managing money than we are and give them the tools they need to avoid the financial traps that still ensnare so many adults. The book will serve as a framework for child rearing that produces grounded young adults with financial habits that reflect maturity beyond their years. Money is central, but it is also a teaching tool that uses the value of a dollar to instill in our children the values we want them to embrace. These traits, curiosity, patience, thrift, modesty, generosity, perseverance, and perspective, don't belong to any one religion, region, or race.